Welcome, everyone. This is a recording of a second workshop to give us a taste about what business design competition is all about for the DAO345 Foundation. So as a reminder, we have two previous videos that are posted on the YouTube, and this is the third one focusing on coral reefs and patterns of aggregation and how we build an ecosystem that is self-maintaining and self-propagating. So just a word of caution, these videos are intended to give you clarity about the business design competition and what we are thinking about, and also inspire your research. So this is why I wanted to record them, post them online as soon as possible so that there is still time. Just as a reminder, so our website has a form to contribute to the business design competition, and then the deadline for submitting is April 17th. Finally, since we are able to get everything out and we did have people interested, we will not be extending this deadline. There may be a second business design competition later, but we would really like to actually have people submit before April 17th. So without further ado, let me start presenting about coral reefs. So what are coral reefs? You always have seen them online, right? And we will look at a few examples in real world as well. They are ecosystems underwater. They are built by tiny coral polyps that secrete calcium carbonate, and they grow through collaborative aggregation, which is why we are looking at them for for biology-inspired DAO models. They rely on symbiotic relationships, and then they are using the power of interconnectedness, right? So they are like underwater cities. They're complex, they're self-sustaining, and they're built through cooperation. And they also create one of the most diverse ecosystems on Earth, and they are hosting thousands of species. So this is why we are using this pretty Midjourney generated visual with a sort of like virtual reality coral reef model. But I would very much encourage you to research in real life, and we have quite a few projects that are looking at coral reefs and how to restore and support restoration of coral reefs. So this is why I wanted to also choose this topic. Okay, so I actually wanted to give you more details about some of the things that are in real life out there that are happening in connection with coral reefs and how to protect corals and what's happening. And also, this could have a bit of an additional insight into what works and what does not work, and potentially how to learn from the fact that corals themselves, they're not super resilient when faced with everything from the environment, and how have they adapted or can adapt, or how we can support this. So this is to raise awareness as well. We had this happening for almost 10 years now in terms of like major back-to-back bleaching events in 2016, 2017 on the Great Barrier Reefs. And then in other reefs around the world, is like we clearly saw at that point that there was a major change needed in coral reef restoration. Australia started funding a program in 2018 to intervene on the Great Barrier Reef to help it adapt to climate change, actually. And they concluded an investigation in a year and a half on various intervention models. They polled on 150 experts from more than 20 organizations around the globe. So they investigated, they called it a concept feasibility study, and they tried to select what could be done that had the highest likelihood of success and more prevention than repair, because we did want to be most effective in terms of like helping the coral be protected before it is destroyed, rather than try to sort of regrow it later on, right? So the same way we're looking today at the rainforest is like step up before it's too late. This started over 10 years ago, right? In terms of like potential interventions, what we can do. And then the first stage of the intervention project that they funded was in 2020, and there was a partnership between the Reef Trust and the Great Barrier Reef Foundation, right? And then, of course, they were like receiving like donations from philanthropy institutions. So what they found, right, is that successful intervention was actually possible and could double the likelihood of sustaining the reef in good condition. And then the longer we wait, the more expensive and difficult it would be, right? So it seems kind of common sense to have this. They also found that there was no single silver bullet solution, but rather a range of methods like applied together to provide compounding benefits, right? Plus ongoing best practices in terms of management and emissions reduction. So essentially, it's like everything all at once approach. Like this is very important. We don't try in a linear style. It's like, oh, we tried this one, it didn't work. We tried this one, it didn't work. We tried no. It's like what like let's brainstorm with all the stakeholders what works, and then we throw everything at the same time. This is wisdom that has been emphasized by a lot of thinkers, philosophers, and scientists such as Aldous Huxley, actually, most famously, just do this, right? And then the interventions, of course, they were intended to protect key ecological functions, but be logistically feasible to deploy at scale, and then a price point which is actually affordable for the entire reefscapes, right? Is like instead of trying to save, oh, we'll save this one, but we can't actually manage the rest. So I would recommend that you guys check this out if you're interested. It is a whole webpage filled with information, the reports, like everything they had, and then of course partnerships, governance, resources, pilot projects, and additional research in terms of like even preservation, planting new corals, moving them, stabilizing them, and everything. So I really recommend this website. Some of the projects I also wanted to highlight, for example, CORDAP.org is a Coral Research and Development Accelerator program, right? So a best science technology to save corals. It is a G20 initiative. It was launched in 2020 to fast track research and development to save the corals. And it uses a transdisciplinary approach with the development of new technologies to support conservation efforts. So again, it can be purely inspiration, or you may actually be moved to do something as well. The statistics are bleak. Over 2/3 of the world's coral reefs have already been lost due to human activity, and the remaining reefs may disappear in the next 10 to 15 years. So essentially, the functionality of the entire ecosystem may be lost if we don't do something. So it becomes very important to actually do this. The more we talk about this, the more we look at these solutions in terms of coral reef models, coral restoration, what are the benefits, the more we try to learn from them, the more also we are raising awareness for this, right? So I would actually also encourage DAOs to use biology-inspired aggregation models in an effort to teach people, right, about these things that are super important. And also in terms of, think about it like this, thankfully we've had years of DAOs in terms of learning about democracy and voting and governance, and like I think that people have never paid more attention to politics, to government, to how decisions were made, because they were able to see in practice. So actual learning at its finest, right? So in the same way, if we're using this biology-inspired aggregation models with the fish schools, with the coral reefs, I do believe that people will start learning about it more and more. People are naturally curious, and then inviting this curiosity and allowing it to operate is very beneficial to actually move things forward. And also because there could be unexpected collaborations in terms of the technology, the efforts, like decentralized science already has taken off, but there's no reason why you cannot collaborate with these larger projects or the like institutional projects. So I would like to invite this discussion as part of the DAO 345 Foundation experiments as well, as like, are there ways that we can actually properly collaborate to in coordinate across all these projects, and perhaps the coordination between the projects would be a very good use case of DAO consensus mechanism and governance mechanism and coordination, right? So all these problems that DAOs are trying to solve, they actually have plenty of practical applications, just that like step out of the office, step away from the computer, actually go there, meet real people in the real world. And this is how we actually see the real problems that require so much work to be solved, right? Something else I wanted to flag in this presentation, because I'm filming this from Roatan, right, to the Duna, there is the makerspace. One of the tools that's being used in terms of like protecting and preserving and creating a new habitat and helping the coral survive is 3D printing seeding units for corals. And then you can actually, so they're very cute. I'm showing you an image here. Like the aim is to restore the coral reefs by creating some structures for the corals to settle on. They don't need to be manually attached to the reef, but can be sort of weaved in or sewn, like you would spread the seeds, right? And then they need to be attractive for the coral to settle in, and then give them shelter, because otherwise they have a very low rate of natural survival in the wild. So these have been developed with like the California Academy of Sciences, the Autodesk Foundation. Like there's a lot of contributions there. And then there was a company called Emerging Objects that designed a suite of seeding unit prototypes, and they partnered to produce 3D printing ceramic units. And they tested them in several locations around the globe, in the Caribbean, in Australia. So see what happens. And then this happened in 2018. And again, there is a website presenting sort of the lessons from that, so that they could be replicated for future projects, right? For coral reservation. For DAO specifically, like this is another good lesson, I feel, because seeding units and seeding new DAOs is actually possible. And it's actually very useful, because you do create the core structure, the exoskeleton of the DAO, but you leave enough room for new life to appear and to aggregate around it, right? So it's not overdoing community and trying to impose someone's vision on everybody else. It's more like, okay, here's the bare bone structure that is compatible, that is attractive, in line with what people are wanting in terms of value and like quality of the project, and then is sort of letting them do it. So creating these models in the similar way with 3D printing them would be like creating these exoskeletons for DAOs and just like allowing people to use them freely and seeing what happens. And this is one of the experiments that we are intending to do with the DAO 345 Foundation. And this is also one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation and sort of present this idea as part of the business design competition that we're using for launch. And think of them as decentralized networks that function through 4 different principles, right? So we have aggregation and growth. They start tiny individuals, and then they form massive, interconnected, interlinked structures over time. So again, very much like the DAO environment today. We have symbiotic relationship model. The corals survive by partnering with the algae, which provide energy through photosynthesis. So we'll talk more about that. There is a layered ecosystems or nested ecosystems. Every species plays a role. So we have the cleaners, the predators, the builders, but they all work together. There's like a pure circular economy model there. And then we have coral spawning, which is very relevant for DAO propagation models in terms of coral reefs reproducing in mass synchronized spawning events, ensuring wide genetic dispersion. So think about what would happen if we did a hackathon combined with forking, for example, right? It's like, hey, what can we generate? What can we generate from here? How we can have cross collaborations? Another thing I wanted to flag actually in terms of protection of corals or learning from corals is that when you look at the coral life cycle, many coral species are broadcasting spawns, and they will release baby corals in the water, right? And they raise to the ocean surface, and then, you know, they start swimming and they start settling on structures, right? And there are a new generation of reefs starts going. But they will not sink to the seafloor and become their metamorphosis unless they are mature enough. And then each stage of the development is a very vulnerable, and so very few actually survive because of course the ecosystem is actually eating them, right? So we have starfish, snails, crabs, worms. They will all eat the baby corals either intentionally as food or by accident as they are eating the algae around, right? So of course they are part of the ecosystem, and then the algae themselves may also cause problems for the young corals because they compete for space with settled corals. So it depends on how much sunlight they are getting. In the same way, if you think about DAOs in the Web3 ecosystem of today, we are seeing this, right? We are seeing a bit of this competition there. We are seeing a bit of this smaller projects getting eaten up by others, or sort of like emptied out by others, right? And we're seeing DAO attacks, we're seeing other things. So again, this is a useful area of research and conversation, seeing how to actually have them survive. And of course, the best survival strategy is to have like huge numbers of new projects and huge numbers, and to try to encourage that spawning things. They like encourages like people starting new DAOs, new projects, and then aggregating, right? In terms of like what is the best fit in terms of the hierarchy of values, what they're building towards, and how to collaborate. And we're learning to create with the technology, with the AI agents. We are actually learning how to create these better models so that people can collaborate easily between themselves from various parts of the world. So part of our jobs as lawyers is like removing the barriers, removing the fragmentation, removing the collaboration barriers, right? So this is, again, something that I wanted to invite as part of the business design competition research and submissions. And like, hey, we actually want to work on these things. Is like, are you guys interested? So from my perspective, or a very simple overview of what I've been seeing in the coral reefs, and there are several lessons that are applicable for DAOs, right? So like reefs, DAOs need a symbiotic relationships between the token holders, the developers, and the users. So like we need to build them as ecosystems. Studying this coral spawning could be interesting for network effects in DAOs, because if we manage to design the right incentives, community engagement and adoption will scale rapidly. And then also, corals could teach us a lot about maintaining that substance, right? So it's not just like, oh, I'm feeding the fish in a hackathon and then they just like swim away to another coral system. It's also building this additional environment and then growing the coral. And then specialized sub-DAOs as guilds or working groups would be managing different functions while staying interoperable. There is this interconnectedness and interoperability that happens in a coral reef ecosystem. And then the corals themselves organize into modular structures that optimize resource flow and protection. So DAOs can similarly benefit from modular governance, because we do know from studying human aggregation models that really effective decision-making and effective governance can only happen in small groups. Effective coordination can only happen in small groups. Even bonds is like, the larger the group, the weaker the bond. So essentially, we can learn from coral reef models in terms of building these modular structures that are connected, but also like standalone, they have some degree of autonomy in terms of how they function. And then coral reefs, I think that most important lesson that I wanted to talk about is that coral reefs do not just sustain themselves, right? They create value for the entire ecosystem. So DAOs should very much try to do this for the industry that's emerging. It's like, okay, how can I create value for the entire ecosystem? Because when that happens, necessarily this interconnectedness will grow and will develop, and those bonds will grow stronger and stronger, and that interconnected network would grow larger and larger, very similar to a coral reef. So I did research the algae in question that live inside the coral tissues. I can't actually pronounce them. I wrote this, so Zooxanthellae. So they are microscopic and they are doing the work inside the coral tissues in a mutualistic symbiotic relationship. They are in charge of doing the photosynthesis and the energy production. So they're covering up to 90% of the coral's energy needs. And then they're also doing the nutrient recycling and ecosystem stability. So they take the CO2 and the waste and they sort of recycle everything. And they're also very cute and very colorful. The bright colors of the corals actually come from these pigments. So when corals experience stress because of rising temperatures or pollution, for example, why do they bleach? Is that they expel this sort of essential symbiotic relationship, and then this is a major sign of an ecosystem collapse, right? So I thought it's fun to have some lessons drawn from these, and sort of I adapted the name with a wink at the Zoo Village and Zoozalo communities, like Zooxanthellae, lessons from four DAOs. First of all, the Web3 life cultures can find a good home in DAOs, right? So if we design the DAOs properly, all this talent that's kind of like undefined floating around right now, but it doesn't actually manage to create something sustainably that lasts, it can find a good home in this sort of coral DAOs, coral reef model DAOs, and then grow from there and expand from there. But talent must be colorful. So people must be authentic, and then the diversity of ecosystem is very important for its health. So we don't really want groupthink. And I wanted to highlight the two essential functions that they're playing, right? So the energy production function is like, okay, so let's think about what would be value adding to a specific project in terms of attracting new contributors, right? Is like, what kind of people do we want to attract in a DAO, and how do we attract them so that their contribution long term is value adding? And again, like, it's long term. It's not just like, oh, I'm a pretty fish and I come because you have a hackathon and then I leave. It's more in terms of like, how do I actually grow with the project, right? It's like, how can we design the incentives? How can we design the metrics a little bit better so that there is retention, there is contributor retention in the DAO ecosystem. And then another thing I wanted to flag is the nutrient recycling through circular integration. So instead of purely vertical integration, like supply chains, or purely horizontal integration, like the cooperative model, we do want to conceive these circular integration models where we would do the recycling of the materials and the products, right? So waste in this sense can be anything that seems like an unused byproduct of someone else's activity and actually fuels another part of the system, or could fuel another part of the system. So this is how, for example, I'm running this experiment in terms of like, how can we sustainably fund public goods by having them be a byproduct of another activity that is actually like a for-profit activity. And then there could be other things like unsuccessful proposals in governance, outdated frameworks for governance, whether the system has tokens in excess supply that could be reused in a different way, whether there are abandoned or forked projects in the ecosystem, general failures and idle assets, right? So let's think about another comparison would be composting, right? So crypto composting pile is like, can we actually reuse some of the existing stuff so that we don't actually replicate effort, and really we take from what already is in place in a certain protocol or ecosystem or DAO. Another invitation. So this is about the business design competition, but after this closes, we'll also we'll launch an app that will be, or rather a DApp on live, that will be actually a DAO live, and will be an invitation for you to participate in the evolution of organizations in a playful way, like testing various models, various structures, and also providing some feedback. Again, playing with these structures and these entities. So that's it for today. And please submit, please comment, and please sign up to be informed of other events and other materials we'll be adding and other content.